Well, folks, it's that time of year again. October, Halloween, the spooky month. And you know what that means. It means I've got to make a spooky video. I'm trying out the face cam today. I appreciate any and all feedback, so if you think I'm ugly, leave a comment, and if you think I'm handsy, be sure to subscribe. You probably read the title of the video, didn't you? You did. You totally did. I know you did. I know you did, you little rat. Now, you're probably also wondering just what I refer to when I say the scariest piece of media ever made. Just know I don't say this lightly. I fully believe this trumps all other contenders. Every classic horror film out there, every Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft story, and every public bathroom story that I've ever heard. Today, I'm bringing you something very special. Today, I'm bringing you Junju. I know how to say his name, I swear. I do. I promise you, I know how to say his name. Today I'm bringing you Junji Ito's magnum opus. Today I'm bringing you Junji Ito's Uzumaki. For those of you who aren't aware of what Uzumaki is, or only have a passing knowledge, it's an adult manga seinen written and illustrated by the endlessly talented Junji Ito. Wikipedia states it to be a dark fantasy, supernatural sci-fi horror, which technically it falls under all those categories. I mean, if you want to be boring, but really, I think it just can be summed up as a cosmic horror. Cosmicism is an idea of how to write horror developed by H.P. Lovecraft, and it essentially is the idea of the horror taking on something incomprehensible. Something so vastly powerful, infinite, and overbearing, it even makes your mom look small. Thanks for watching. This kind of horror is designed to make you remember how insignificant and small you are in the vastness of the universe. Here, let me read you something. Do you remember the kind of fear you got when you first sat there in bed as a wee lad, thinking to yourself, realizing that you're gonna die, and that it doesn't even really matter that you're gonna die, because everyone you love and everything you'll never get the chance to love, including the universe itself, is gonna die too? You know, that kind of fear? That's the kind of fear that cosmicism is trying to invoke. It's trying to leave you with an empty pit of questions in your stomach and leaving you no way to fill it. Although, I don't think tries to do would be fair of me to say, because it almost implies a lack of success. Really, there have been a ton of cosmic horrors out there that have done really, really well. H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu, for example, is considered a classic by many horror fans, and it's not even 30 pages long. It got me on the edge of my good old rocking chair just through its usage of incredible cosmic horror. You know what? Speaking of the good old rocking chair, why don't we take a peek on over there to take a proper look at this short story? Welcome to the rocking chair. To give a quick summary, The Call of Cthulhu follows the lamentful account of a man who has been able to piece together some rather unsavory things after searching through his uncle's worldly possessions. Pretty simple setup, I know. He's able to piece together that within this world there exist gods, and not nice ones. They've existed for all eternity, and there's a small cult of people that worship them. And due to a recent earthquake, they have been disturbed in the ocean where they lie. And the greatest of all of them, Cthulhu, came into contact with humans because he lives at the surface. Cthulhu is so powerful that he drove all of the humans that witnessed him instantly dead or insane, except for one. And the one that survived wrote down his experience before he died shortly thereafter. And it's in what that man wrote that we find the climax of our piece, and a great example of cosmic horror. The city which the sailors arrive in to find Cthulhu in is described as being filled with angles that don't make sense, such as obtuse angles that operate as acute angles. And it's described as having these infinitely tall pillars that rise up out of the ocean, made out of an unknown material. Even the doors Cthulhu come out of are described to be on an ungodly scale, opening in a way that makes no sense at all to the reader, and certainly not any to those present to see it. Even Cthulhu himself is pretty strange. He's described as having the head of an octopus with a scaly humanoid body and webbed fingers and slender bat-like wings. It all serves to contribute to a more abstract horror that you can imagine but not picture in your head clearly. It's too vaguely described to you and not specific enough. It's just too strange. You're left with a lot of uncertainty and questions by the end of the short story. And that's fair. It reads like a mystery novel. I mean, there's a whole paragraph dedicated in this thing just to asking questions. Our narrator recounting all the things that he and we don't know. By the end of the story, you're really only left with a distinct impression, and that, of course, being dread and unease. With that said and done, let me tell you, this ain't got nothing on Uzumaki. Come on. Uzumaki's on a whole nother level. H.P. Lovecraft can't even compete with Junji Ito's mastery over cosmicism. Lovecraft's Cthulhu may have laid down the groundwork and have shown a good example of what cosmicism can do, but Uzumaki is it in its rawest, most elite potential that it can ever hope to achieve. But hold on now. I haven't even told you what Uzumaki is about. If you're going into this blind, you don't know a lick about it. I haven't told you anything. So let me read you the synopsis provided by the back of the book. Kurozucho, a small fog-bound town on the coast of Japan, is cursed. According to Shuichi Saito, the withdrawn boyfriend of teenager Kirigoshima, their town is haunted, not by a person or being, but a pattern. Uzumaki, the spiral, the hypnotic secret shape of the world. Needless to say, I think this is a pretty unique approach to horror. Our main antagonist isn't even a tangible thing, it's a concept, a shape. But I suppose out of all the shapes he could have chosen, a spiral is probably the scariest. I mean, right up there with trapezoids. Now that I've told you what Uzumaki is about, I think we can finally get to the why. Jibeki is the name for a concept that I've heard before, but couldn't for the life of me find a name for. I asked everyone I could think to ask, even Bing, but I just couldn't find anything. So I came up with my own name to use for now, because everything deserves a name, and why not Jibeki? It's dumb. Anyway, Jibeki is a technique used in Uzumaki, and in fact throughout all of Junji Ito's short stories and literature, and it pertains to how he uses the protagonist. You see, in most stories, as you read, watch, or play, you build up a connection with the protagonist, and you get to understand them. For instance, in The Last of Us, we get to know Joel really, really well. We see his triumphs and his downfalls. We see his weaknesses and his strengths. We get to see every aspect of Joel. And when you see him get a piece of iron put through his abdomen and he almost dies, it's really scary. You don't want Joel to die. He's really freaking cool, and it makes me really sad to see him die, because I kind of like him and his cool looking beard and his silky soft voice, and this game, it's a good game, play it. But remember how I said most stories, because in Uzumaki, the characters never take center stage. For instance, when you see Shuichi's dad become possessed and obsessed with the spiral, and it all culminates in a climactic death that is just horrific, you don't feel bad for Shuichi, who's a main character, or his dad, because you're too busy being horrified by the fact that he turned himself into a human spiral. It's kind of hard to overlook that. It's kind of hard to feel anything else when you're looking at that. It's awful. It's gross. All you know about the characters in Uzumaki are the absolute necessities. What I read you on the back of the book about Shuichi and Kirie, that's all you get to know about them. Because if I knew that Kirie had some aspiration to become a stay-at-home astronaut and she was having a really hard time with her calculus class because her teacher's just so mean or whatever, it wouldn't do jack crap in making the story scarier. Every character, without exception, lives for their purpose and then they die. But in The Last of Us, me knowing that Joel's daughter died to these stupid zombies, and knowing the trauma it has caused him, seeing it firsthand, it makes it really, really scary to see Ellie in any kind of danger at all. In Uzumaki, me seeing Kirie put in danger does nothing for me, because it's never the fact that she's in danger. It's what's putting her in danger that causes the fear. With Ito, it's always about whatever horrific thing he's come up with for today and how he wants to show it to you. And usually it seems that comes in the form of body horror, which I love. I think it is the scariest, most vile thing on the planet at times. And Junji Ito is a master of it. He includes it in pretty much all of his short stories. I mean, take a look at the front cover of this thing right here. You got some classic body horror on display for you. I think Uzumaki might have his finest example of body horror yet. Well, certainly his most prolific and noteworthy one. You've probably seen this image before when scouring the web if you're a horror fan. I know I encountered it before I read Uzumaki. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you now. Just fair warning, it's sort of hard to look at and it involves eyeballs. And I know personally eyeballs can set me off, so fair warning. How does the image make you feel? Confused? Uncomfortable? A little bit sick to your stomach, maybe? Aroused? The ultimate goal of body horror is to make you uncomfortable in your own skin. And sometimes it can be in a very subtle way, like just making the proportions on something a little off, like those little gray aliens you see. Their heads are too big and their arms are too long. You might not be consciously aware of it, but subconsciously you know it's incorrect. My favorite example of body horror is with The Exorcist, because you get to see a really nice progression of it. By the beginning of the film, the main girl who gets possessed is completely normal, as you'd expect. And then slowly she begins to do more and more inhuman things, flung around the room, some projectile vomiting. And then eventually, you get to some really uncanny stuff, like the backwards crab walk down the stairs, and her face becomes less and less truly human and looks rotten and covered in oozy grossness. It's really classic stuff. What makes Uzumaki's body horror particularly effective, however, is Junji Ito's spectacular art and paneling. Without any audio to speak of, Ito's art has to work twice as hard in order to get the same effect as a jump scare. And, God, it does it. It totally does it. His art is amazing. Every single panel, every single background, and sometimes legitimately, no exaggeration, every single line is accounted for to give you the most possible scare out of a panel possible. Let's rewind real quick to chapter 3 and that image we were looking at earlier. Notice how when you look at this page alone, it's still pretty scary. Obviously, I gave you a warning earlier, and I think that's a good testament to Ito's art. It's scary. Look at it. It's spooky. It's got an eyeball. It's doing the weird. It's gross. I don't like it. I don't like it. But if we add in the chapter leading up to this moment, it becomes even more scary. Trust me, I tested it out on people. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to follow the link in the description. It leads you to a website where you can read Uzumaki. It's not in super HD definition, and you should probably just buy the book already. God dang it, if I haven't convinced you yet, I don't know what to do. It reads left to right. I want you to keep only one page on the screen at a time, and come back to me when you're finished reading chapter 3. I hope you thought it was at least a little bit scarier with context, and I don't know, if not, then I don't know, go read the book. It's a different experience reading the actual book, honestly. But anyway, remember how I asked you to keep only one page on the screen at a time? Well, I sure hope you did, because it completely validates the point that I'm about to talk about. Ito, in all of his works, does this really subtle thing, where he uses something that everyone takes for granted to give more impact to his scares. The turning of the page. Notice, for instance, how when we look at this page, does this look familiar to you? It's the page leading up to the eyeball scare. But notice how the eyeball doesn't come until we turn the page. By attaching the scare to a physical action, the turning of the page, particularly a moment where you can't tell exactly what's going on because the art doesn't become clear until that page is fully turned, it adds more suspense and anticipation to the scare. On top of it, the little panels where you see the characters reacting to the horror before you get to see it. And it all culminates into something that I'd call a genuine experience. Now, before we go any further, I want to discuss a major issue that I have with Junji Ito. And it doesn't really apply to everyone around the world, it's more just his American audiences or his non Japanese audiences. And it revolves around the sheer bizarreness of his stories. There's no getting around it. One of his stories involves the end of the world, brought by giant balloons that have nooses below their necks and the shape of human heads, and they seek out the head that they're shaped as and want to try to tie the noose around the neck of that person. And that story is genuinely scary. But the amount of disbelief I have to put aside in order to get properly invested in it is a lot more than the average person. I don't think I'd be able to do it so easily if I hadn't lived in Japan for 3 years and just gotten used to their zany horror and zany everything that they are into, you know? That's besides the point. Because what needs to happen when you read Junji Ito is you need to just accept it. He is coming from an absolutely different culture, a polar opposite in some ways to American culture. And that's okay. You just need to accept the really honestly silly nature of the horror that is Junji Ito. That's Uzumaki. All this talk about how silly things can get brings me back to where we all started. If you recall, cosmicism is the idea of the horror taking on something incomprehensible. And Uzumaki achieves this perfectly thanks to how bizarre the story is. I mean, really, what is there to comprehend about this story? We're really just watching a force of nature rip through a town of people, killing each and every one of them slowly, in increasingly disturbing ways, all revolving around a pattern. By the end of it, the town is really a hellscape. It doesn't seem like it's anything you could have avoided. I mean, really, you either lived in Kurozucho, or you didn't. There's not really anything for us to latch onto either. With Jason Voorhees, you know that he drowns in water, apparently, and with Freddy Krueger, you know that he lives off of fear. But Uzumaki, there's nothing. You know nothing about the horror. You just watch it happen. After reading Uzumaki, I've never seen a spiral the same way. It's always had a negative connotation attached to it now, like it's something for me to be scared of. Lingering there in the back of my mind, just a negative aura. I think there's something to be said about that. It's the scariest piece of media ever released. The scariest work of fiction of all time. I fully believe it. You may not. It's not for everyone. Heck, the thing's in black and white. It doesn't even have any audio. And it's really weird. But it made me scared. Well, hey, that's the end of the video. I just got done editing it, and the audio and video portions of all this was just a huge nightmare to tackle. There were a lot of problems, but it was a lot of fun at the same time, and I realized how hard it is to film it. So next time you watch a Scott the Woz episode, just know that what he's doing is really hard, and he's a master, seriously. Anyway, if you made it this far, you're probably someone I know, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you're someone I don't know, then subscribe, leave a like. I'd really appreciate it. And thanks for watching, really, seriously. But that's about it. Music's in the description in case you're interested. Peace.